Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Otha Smith on the Riderflex podcast. Hello, Otha. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Steve?
Hanging in there, man. Are you in Maryland?
Yes, I am. It's good to be home after being on the road so often.
You've been traveling a lot lately?
Yeah. Last month I was only home 4 days out of the entire month. So
that's
yeah,
tough.
yeah, really tough. Spent a little bit of time in Chicago, a little bit of time in Massachusetts, Connecticut. So it was a tough month, but we got it done.
Isn't it interesting when you're young and first starting your career? You know, the travel, like the travel sounds great. You know, it's like, I get to travel and be on planes and hotels. That shit, that goes away fast, doesn't it? It gets old super quick.
Oh, yeah, it gets old really quickly. I tell people all the time, they're like, oh, it must be nice to travel. I'm like,
no, it ain't.
Not really. I'm like, hotels get old, airports get old, especially when you get delayed. But you do become an expert at traveling with bare minimums to get what you need accomplished wherever you're going. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. We could do a whole podcast on flying. Yeah, if I never have to fly again, that's just fine with me.
I'm right there with you.
You know, unless it's like a little private, jet, like where I could go to like a regional airport and just, get on with a few other people. Okay, fine. I'll do that. But the other stuff, nightmare.
Exactly. If it's a Gulfstream, then we're talking different languages. But
yeah, totally.
Commercial air, that's totally, I could do without.
Are you in Annapolis? Is that where you live?
So I live about 30 minutes south of Annapolis, in Crofton, Maryland. So not too far from the sailor capital for sure.
I know the area pretty well. I worked in DC/Maryland area for about 3 years, and been to Annapolis many times. Cool little downtown, and nice little cool little bars and stuff. Cool little area, right?
Yeah, I was actually downtown Annapolis yesterday at a place called O'Brien's because they have really good food and they have daily specials. And so yesterday was their mussel special. So $10, big bucket of mussels overlooking the waterfront. Doesn't get any better than that, especially with the weather being like 70 degrees yesterday.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, your mussels and crab in Maryland when the weather's good outside, like on a patio restaurant. Yeah, that's good stuff.
There's nothing like it. Old Bay, they put Old Bay on everything,
Seriously. I live in Colorado, and we have seafood restaurants here, but it's not, there's just no comparison, right? There's no comparison. And I remember the first time I went to Maryland, people were like, no, you got to try the crab here. Like it's a different deal. And I remember the first time I had real crab in Maryland, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is a completely different experience.
Yeah, I've been here, born and raised here 41 years, and I always say I will go to other places to potentially live for a while, but I got to come back and die in Maryland because I got to have my crabs and seafood.
Totally. Yeah, totally. So you grew up in that area then? Is that where your folks are from?
So yeah, I grew up in a rural part of Maryland. Annapolis is Anne Arundel County, and so I grew up in southern Anne Arundel County. So very rural part of Maryland. I grew up on about 3.5 acres of land. My neighbors all had equivalent sized property, so very quiet and just very, very sacred to a degree.
Talk to me about your mom, dad, siblings. Give me some background there.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I'm in cannabis because my mom has a doctorate in education. So you can imagine the whole DARE campaign, say no to drugs. And when I left my corporate job to get into cannabis, she was like, so you're going to start selling dope, huh? I'm just like, No, not doing that. But
That's pretty funny.
yeah, she rose to the ranks. She started off as a English teacher when I was a kid, and then grew to become a principal and then superintendent and so forth.
Wow,
Uh,
cool. Wow, that's great. Good for her. Wow, great career.
yeah. And my father was a computer programmer.
Okay.
He's, like most living so close to Washington, D.C., he worked for the government as a contractor.
Okay.
And so he did that, and that's what got me into computers and technology. I have two sisters, one older sister, and she runs a daycare facility and has been doing that for, man, I don't even know, probably 20, 30 years now.
Okay.
I have a younger sister who works for the government as well. So she's a contract specialist. So she handles all those big contracts that, take place with the government and so forth. So she has a pretty demanding job because she works for FEMA.
Ah,
And
really? Okay. All right.
yeah, and then you have me. So I'm in the middle. So
Do your mom and dad still have that property there that you talked about, or no?
yeah, so unfortunately my father, he passed away close to 9 years ago.
Oh,
But my mother still has the property. So at
cool.
the time I was actually living in Baltimore prior to my father passing away. So, once he passed away, I moved as close as possible. So that's why I now live in Crofton because I mean, my mom is 75 years old, three and a
Okay.
half acres of land, pretty nice size house. It's a lot for her to manage. So I'm here taking care of her a lot of the time as well.
Wow, it's interesting you bring that up. My mom lives in Oklahoma, and her and her husband, they're in their late 70s. Last time I was there, and they have 10 acres. And last time I was there, you can just tell like it's just harder to maintain, just little things, right? Whatever it might be, little repairs, this and that. I mean, to keep a place up like that when you're in your late 70s, it's hard. And good move on your part to get closer because she'll probably need you more as it moves along.
Yeah, for sure. She keeps me busy. That's for sure. But especially in the wintertime, because the house is all electric. So we have a wood burning stove and, she can't be lugging in wood or splitting wood, all that stuff. So
Okay.
it's been interesting to say the least.
Were you a good kid? I mean, were you like straight A student? Were you a rebel? Like what kind of kid were you?
Oh, I was absolutely a rebel.
Were you? Okay.
Yeah, just growing up with my mom being a teacher at first and just like putting such a heavy emphasis on school. I just rebelled. I was like, I don't want to do school. Like you're preaching it all the time. My, friends would know me as, your teacher, your mom's a teacher. So I would get bullied a little bit. And I'm like, I'm going against the grain then. And so yeah, I did enough to pass. School always came relatively easy to me. I really didn't have to study. So, I look over things, scan over stuff, and then take the test and get a B or a C and be happy with it. But
Okay. All right.
yeah.
Did you ever get in any trouble? Did you ever have to call dad from the sheriff's office or anything crazy? Anything cool?
Oh, absolutely. Again, that's why I'm in cannabis, man. So I started smoking cannabis when I was like 15 years old because the area that I grew up in, with everyone having 3, 4 acres of land, it was notorious for growing cannabis.
Gotcha.
My neighbor behind us actually got busted years later for growing like acres worth of cannabis. So you can imagine he got some linebacker years for that. But
Mm, mm.
yeah, I definitely been arrested. DUI once,
Oh,
cannabis possessions.
yeah.
My parents bailed me out, so I gave them a challenge, that's for sure.
Who was who was tough? Like, who was up more upset? Was dad tougher on you when you got home from that, or was mom, or were we kind of equal? I was just curious.
Oh no, it was definitely my mom. My mom, she was like, you're ruining my reputation. This might hit the news, blah blah blah. And it's like, and my dad was just so chill. Like when my dad graduated high school, he moved out to California, San Francisco, California.
Okay.
And so he was out there doing the Haight Ashbury movement, the big hippie movement.
Oh
And
wow. Oh, okay. Yeah. So he's like, yeah.
all right, he just told me, he was like, just don't get caught with it in your car anymore. He was like, I don't care if you smoke weed, but just don't ride with it because you're gonna get arrested. So after the
Mhm.
second time, he was like, "Didn't I tell you?" I was like, "Yeah, you were right." So
Did you ever smoke with him? Did he ever smoke with you?
nah, so we never had that opportunity, unfortunately. But we did damn sure drink a lot together. That's for sure.
I remember I got two sons. They're both grown, and the first time I smoked with my youngest son, and I think now I have smoked with my daughter too. We have four kids altogether, but the first time I smoked with one of the kids, Spencer, he was here at the house, and we were on the back porch, and we smoked, and it was weird for me. Like it was just like I was having like I was standing there. I'm like, man, I'm trying to relax, but can't really, like, this is odd. Like, I don't know how to act. I don't know what to say. This is weird. I've gotten better at it now. I'm better at it
No,
now. First time was odd for me. It felt
no,
odd.
no, I'm right there with you. So I have a daughter who's 20, goes to school at Virginia Tech she's studying to be a veterinarian. So
Oh,
shout
cool.
yeah, so shout out to my baby girl Alana. But
Awesome. Awesome.
she had never smoked before, but she was curious, once I got into this industry and she was asking what I was doing. And then of course she asked me like, do you smoke and all that? I was like, yeah, absolutely. So I do remember on spring break, we were driving back from Virginia Tech, which is about a 5-hour drive back to Maryland. And it was like, you want to smoke? She was like, yeah. And her eyes lit up. And I was like, open up the glove compartment. And she pulled out a joint and we started smoking. And I'm right there with you, Steve. It was a little awkward at first for like a
At
good,
first, yeah.
yeah, for like a good nanosecond. I was like, what the hell am I doing? But I was like, man, this is awesome. I mean, having the ability to bond with your kids and have them feel comfortable to, smoke cannabis with you or just tell you information is a beautiful thing. So it was
Yeah.
a special moment.
Now, so all the time growing up, like when she was in high school and all that, like she never knew that you smoked.
Oh, I hit it really well, like super well.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Damn. You must. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Where
Yeah,
are you? Go ahead.
especially in the winter time, because she would always say to my wife, like, Daddy's always in the bathroom, because I would always just go to the bathroom, turn the fan on, and smoke in there. So, now many years later, I'm like, those times I was in the bathroom, I was actually smoking a lot.
That's pretty funny. That's pretty good. Are you married or what's your social status?
Yeah, so married, been with my wife 16 years in total, but been married for 9. I held out pretty long, as long as I could.
She eventually said, hey, she kind of dropped the hammer and is like, hey, look, are we doing this or not?
Yeah, she was like, what are we doing here? Are we doing this or not? Like, well, we just playing house, or we gonna make this a reality? So we took that big leap and it's been a great experience.
That's cool, man. What's she do for a living?
So she is a project manager for a large plumbing company, one of the largest in the country. So,
Okay.
I always make the joke and say, you're the sexiest plumber alive. Working in an industry that's completely dominated by men. It's
Totally.
interesting some of the stories she tells. I'm just like, he said that to you? Like, really?
I was just talking to somebody about that the other day. It was a lady. I think she was. I don't know if it was plumber. Oh, it was welder. She was like HR for like a welding company, And I asked her. I was like, the language, the style, the man. I'm like, she goes, oh yeah. She goes,
She's
we
probably
don't
heard
really.
it all.
She's like, we really don't have HR here. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Your wife's probably, she probably hears things and she's like, okay.
Oh yeah.
In a normal world, you'd be fired for that, but we'll just move on.
Oh yeah, 100%. It reminds me of my days when I was in college and I worked for United Rentals, a rental company to contractors and construction. And it's a different talk,
Totally.
It's a totally different talk. And
Completely. Yep.
totally acceptable. It's just the way it is. But that was a learning curve for me. I was like, damn, okay, I could just really say whatever's on my mind and use whatever language I want, and I don't get in trouble for it. This is a cool industry.
I had one of those experiences. My dad was in the oil field his whole life. And at one point he had a roustabout service, he had like a couple of backhoes and a bulldozer, and he would, do projects. And I was in junior high, and I got to go to work with him one day. And I got there, and all those roustabout old guys were standing around in the yard. And I was just like, oh, wow, I didn't know Dad talked like this on I came home, I told my mom, I'm like, yeah, I heard a bunch of words I never heard before.
I was surprised your pops didn't tell you, like, hey, now when we go home,
No,
repeat anything or say anything to your mom.
he didn't do it. No. And he never talked like that at home. I never heard him curse or anything around my mom at home. But man, when he was at work with the guys, it was just totally different. But
Put it all out.
Yeah, man, for sure. Okay, so cannabis was a part of your life as a youth, obviously. So high school, college. I mean,
Yep.
it was part of it. The entrepreneurial spirit looks like it was in there, which I find interesting because your mom and dad, one worked for the state, one worked for the government, so they weren't really entrepreneurs. But somehow you had the bug because you had like a little detailing business going on in college. So you had talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so my older sister, she's an entrepreneur, being working with kids in that arena. And I actually have an older brother, but he passed away, and he was entrepreneur as well. So back in, I guess that would be the 80s, when water beds were like super hot, everybody had a water bed.
Oh yeah, I had one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone in the family here had a water bed, and he had like 3 locations at the time. So,
Oh, cool.
you know, yeah, so I was reading like P&L statements at a very young age just through my brother's interaction.
That's where it came from. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
so that's where it came from. And
Right.
so, we were really close. So that's where it all started. But my parents did pretty well. So they had some pretty nice cars, and in order for me to make some additional money, my dad would be like, "Hey, why don't you go wash those cars for us, and you can make some extra income." So I was like, "Sweet, why not?" So I started washing their cars, and that really turned into a passion. And then I was like, you know what? I actually don't mind this. And then I started tinting windows in high school, and
Okay.
then started tinting more windows, and I was like, I think I could start a little business here. And so that's when I started aggressive detailing. I remember thinking about, what am I going to name this company? I don't know what to name this company. Then my high school friend said, name it after your personality. So I was like, aggressive? He was like, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so that's how aggressive detailing was born. And when I initially started it, I can remember like yesterday, I printed business cards off of a at-home computer.
Yeah.
I printed flyers at home, and just started passing the flyers out, dropping them in mailboxes throughout the neighborhoods. And
Okay.
it grew from doing residential work to eventually starting to land contracts with dealerships. Car
Whoa. Whoa. Did you have to hire an employees or
Oh
no?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started off, I was using temp work,
Okay.
just
Okay.
because I was like, I don't know how sustainable this is. I don't want to hire people and it's just be like a rush and then
Mm,
nothing
mm.
happens.
Yeah, good idea.
So I hired temp workers at first, but as you know, like they're not. It's hard to get skilled people when it comes to detailing cars when it's just temp work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So as the company grew and I started to get these relationships with dealerships, I was like, all right, now I got steady clients and steady income. So that's when I started hiring people.
Okay.
And then we grew that to start doing boats. So I started getting contractual relationships with marinas, and then we started doing small planes like Cessnas. I mean, anything that had a engine in it, we were detailing it.
Nice. Nice. That's
So
great,
that's
man. And you were doing that while you were going to school. You started it while you were in college, right? Or no?
yeah, I really started it when I was in high school. My
Okay.
senior year of high school, I started it, and then took it full blast when I graduated high school.
Okay.
Went to school at Virginia State in Petersburg, so I put it on ice for a little bit. But my phone just kept ringing and ringing. So I said, you know what, Mom and Dad, I know you're not going to like this, but I'm dropping out of school.
Oh, oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. They weren't happy. Mom definitely wasn't happy.
Definitely not. So I did my freshman year at Virginia State in Petersburg, Virginia. I came home, dropped out of school, Alana was born, started the detailing business, and yeah, just ran with it. Had like 15, 20 employees at the height. I was able to put myself through college with that business, and then
Because you went back to school, went to Bowie State University, so you went back to college. Yeah.
exactly. So
Okay.
I went back to school because after Alana was born, I was like, all right, let me start listening to what my parents are saying. And like, I know I'm running this business, I'm making good money, but it's always great to just have that piece of paper just to, rely on just in case,
Yeah.
things go sideways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I went back.
There had to be a moment there where, so the timeline, if I understand it right, is right about the time you're quitting college. You also have to come home and tell your parents that your girlfriend's pregnant, and your dad is like, okay, so here
Yeah,
he's
he's
quit
like, here we go.
school. Here we go. Now I'm gonna have to take care of a kid. Yeah, I could just see the look on his face.
Yeah, it was intense. Like I said, he was so chill and relaxed. He was like, well, you better figure it out.
Yeah, you
And
better figure it out.
yeah, and so I figured it out. My mom was,
Yeah.
happy, of course, but also like, yeah, you really better figure it out.
But it went good. So you did well. I mean, you ran it for what, 8 years? Why'd you stop doing that?
2008, my brother. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
got to.
yeah, when 2008 happened, a lot of the
Mm.
dealerships were closing up, or they were just hiring, someone that they paid $10 an hour to just clean the cars.
Mm.
Um, a lot of
Yes,
residential income dried up. People are like, I'm not spending money on getting my car washed. I need to make sure I can pay these bills and pay my mortgage.
yes, yes.
Um, yeah, so we were working, 7 days a week, always open, never closed, and making like half the money. So it was a tough decision, but I was like, I'm young. Let me just 25 at the time. I was like, let me just close this down and decide what I want to do.
And then you had to go get like a regular job, which I'm sure you were like, this sucks.
Yeah, I was like, man, this is no fun. Like I like being my own boss, making my own
Yeah.
schedule. So yeah, when I closed aggressive detailing, I sat around for close to a year. It was like it's really methodical. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to start another business? If so, what do I want to do it in?
Okay.
But at the time, solar electricity was really hot. I mean, everywhere you look, solar this, solar that. And so I went to go work for a solar company and did that for about 9 years. They were owned by Constellation Energy, which is owned by Exelon, so they're the largest utility in the country. So I
Okay.
spent about 8 years in the renewable energy division, and I loved it. I mean,
Oh,
love
really?
renewable
Okay.
energy. It was a great time.
Were you thinking the whole time, like, I'm going to learn this business and then start something on my own, or you were just kind of cruising with a career?
Yeah, I was just cruising because I was happy. I was making
All right. All
really
right.
great money. So
Okay.
entrepreneurial, even though I always had that, it was needling me, like I want to get back into working for myself, but I
Yeah.
was doing well, making great money. So really I pushed it to the side for a while.
Okay. And your daughter's growing up and you guys are kind
Yeah.
of moving along, raising your family. Okay. Um, what happened? The entrepreneurial bug just you couldn't take it anymore? Tell me what happened.
Well, during that process, when I was working in the solar industry, I got into a really bad car accident.
Okay.
So in 2006, I was involved in a car accident where I fell asleep at the wheel and
Mm.
was ejected about like 30 feet, landed on my head. So I have a beautiful scar right here and a long one that goes pretty much the entire length of the top of my head.
Were you wearing your seatbelt?
I was not.
Were
And
you, did you hit somebody else or you hit like a tree or what happened?
yeah, so what happened was I was driving and I had three friends with me.
Oh man. Oh shit.
Yeah, had three friends with me, and every single one of them was asleep. We had just got back from dinner. It was like, midnight down in DC actually.
Okay.
So I'm driving home 5 minutes from the house, like it always happens. And I just dozed off. And I remember the only thing I remember is waking up, like about to just plow right into the back of this car, and it had children in the back of it. So
Oh
I
shit.
Yeah, man. So I swerved to overcorrect and I overcorrected, hit a guardrail, the car flipped, and I was thrown out of it.
Okay, so you didn't hit the car in front of you with the kids in it.
Nope,
Okay.
I just swerved over correct, and that's when
Okay.
I hit that guardrail. And
Any alcohol or drugs in you at the time?
no, no, thank God, thank God.
Yeah, no shit, bro. Because you might have went to jail. We might not be talking right now.
Yeah, yeah, I might be behind bars right now.
Were your friends hurt as well? Were they talk to me about that?
Yeah, so they walked away with no injuries, similar to the ones I sustained. My friend's girlfriend, she did lose like two of her teeth.
Okay.
So that was tough, but I was pretty much pronounced dead on the scene.
Mm,
Luckily for me, my good friend at the time was going to school at John Hopkins to become a doctor, which she is today.
okay.
So she's the one who used that, her medical instinct, ran to my aid, until the helicopter arrived. So I definitely owe her,
Mm,
everything. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her, because I was pretty much like, leave him
mm,
alone. He's pretty much dead.
wow.
Here for
Life changing event. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah,
Life.
man. Here for a reason, that's for sure.
Are you do you have are you a faithful guy, or are you now, or what's your status? Do you say prayers every day, or I'm guessing you were saying some that day?
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I don't pray every day, but I've always had a faith, believing in a higher power. But after that
Okay.
accident, it definitely,
Yeah.
reinstilled it that, there's someone out there who's looking over us all, and
Yeah.
some he decides to take, someone he decides to leave because there's more work to be finished. So
Mhm. Did you wake
yeah,
up on scene, or you woke up in the hospital
I woke up in the hospital days later.
days later? Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I suffered a traumatic brain injury as a result. Um,
Okay.
and that's what changed my path, ultimately, because when I was released from the hospital, I was prescribed just a deadly cocktail of opioids. I mean,
Yep.
you know
Yep.
how it works.
Absolutely. This is what happens. They just write prescriptions for the Oxycontin or whatever. Yeah.
Yep, Oxycontin, Xanax, Percocets. I mean, you
Yeah.
name it, I was prescribed it. And
Yep.
to put that in context, like prior to that car accident, I can remember on like one hand how many times I've used a pill for anything,
Okay.
even a headache. And so when I was forced with this decision, like, all right, well, here's your bag of drugs that you got to use for the rest of your life, I'm like, really? So I did it for about 3 years, used these prescription pills. And, my girlfriend, who is, my now wife, was the one who was like, after 3 years, she was like, enough is enough. Like the side effects, I was getting irritable. I mean,
Mm,
it was a
mm,
dark day, a dark time in my life.
mm,
And
mm,
that's when I said, enough of this. I'm putting all my faith back into cannabis because it's something that always, made me feel good.
okay. But were you still smoking kind of casually, or you just increased the smoke and decreased the pills at that time?
Yeah, so it was a blend. So I, weaned myself off the pills by, using cannabis.
Okay.
And that took about, I want to say like 6 months.
Wow. Mm,
Definitely the toughest thing I did in my life, man.
mm,
By
mm.
far. But I was able to get completely off of pills and just use cannabis moving forward.
Did you see that series with Michael Keaton in it about the Oxycontin up in West Virginia or whatever? I mean, damn, that was like, holy shit, these people are getting hooked on these pills so easily. What was the hardest pill for you to stop taking?
I would say it's probably with Xanax,
Okay.
because that's a benzodiazepine. And so it just changes your chemical imbalance in your brain, man. And a lot of people, it's clearly defined, and if you read the fine print, that once you stop taking Xanax, suicidal thoughts can start to happen.
Did that happen? Did
Oh
that
yeah,
happen?
oh
Really?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because it just changes your whole mindset. And so Xanax was definitely the toughest to cut loose.
Were the suicidal thoughts, was it because of pain and your mind is saying, I don't want to live with the pain, or just other hallucinogenic? I don't, yeah, educate me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really nail down. It was kind of like, yeah, the pain, and this is the best drug. It's like, a silver bullet, if you will.
Mm,
So it's like the one thing that I knew, if I took that, I would always have instant relief. I'd feel calm because, suffering a TBI, like I've never had anxiety. And once I suffered that TBI, now I have crazy anxiety. And Xanax is perfect for treating people with anxiety. And so I was like, man, this is something that's always worked for me. I'm scared to cut it out. And then once I did cut it out, my brain was just like, you need it, you need it. And when I was trying to tell my brain, no, I don't need it, it was like, do I even want to live my life like this constant battle inside? Like it was challenging.
How did you go back to work right away? How long did it take you to go back to work?
It took about, man, it's hard to keep. It's hard to really put that into a time because there's so much was lost. But I think it took about 3 months before I went back to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So this event really catapults you further towards cannabis being a relief and a substitute for these shitty ass pills. And you became even more of a fan about what cannabis can do for you beyond just having a good time and getting high. You really started diving into that.
Yeah, it totally changed the way I view cannabis. Like before, I was just like, oh, it's just something I like to do because I get to catch a buzz and whatever. But after using cannabis and being more conscious about my cannabis use, I was like, this is a medicine, you know? I started doing research into it. I was like, holy shit, like cannabis has been used for thousands of years as a medicine. Yes. I mean, it wasn't until like the 1920s where, you know, the US made cannabis illegal, and that was all driven by racist motives. So that's when I was like, this has always been a medicine. And so I really started to dive into it. But, you know, fast forward many years later, in Colorado becomes the first state to actually legalize cannabis for recreational use. And I was one of the first people on a plane out there. So I was like, I got to see what this is all about. Wide open, you know?
Okay. So how does the entrepreneurial piece start? Walk me into Tetragram. And by the way, let's just get this in here real quick. It's tetragramapp.com. Tetragramapp.com is the website. Walk me into this transition. How does this develop for you, this business, Tetragram? Talk to me about that.
So when I went to Colorado and I went into a dispensary for the first time, I was just blown away. Like definitely had that WTF moment. Like I thought I knew everything there was about cannabis. And when I walked into that dispensary, I was like, holy shit, like I've only seen cannabis in flower, but now I'm seeing it in concentrates and, you know, all these other different form factors that you just don't see in the legacy market. Learning about terms such as indica, sativa. I'm like, what is all this? You know? And so when I came back home, Maryland legalized their program years later. And then I started learning about terpenes and cannabinoids. You know, terpenes is what gives cannabis its smell and its taste, and different cannabinoids that give it a certain effect as well. So I was like, there's so much more of this. And everyone that I talked to said, you know, it's best to keep track of what you're using because there's so many products to choose from. Cannabis affects everyone differently. There's no way you're going to figure it out on your own, trying to recall all this by memory. And so that's when I had the light bulb effect. And I was like, because I would see dispensaries selling paperback journals to patients saying, here's a journal, write down what you're using, how it made you feel.
Oh, see. Okay.
Yeah, and every person I talked to that had a medical background, because here in Maryland, every dispensary has to have someone with a medical background at the dispensary so that they can provide that hand-holding approach and cannabis education. And every nurse I talked to was like, use a journal, keep a journal, keep a journal. I'm like, we live in a day and age where everything we do is on our phone. I'm not going to write this down. And so that was the light bulb effect, Steve. That's why I was like, all right, I see a need here. I see people using these journals. Why don't I build an app so that people can keep track of all that information on their phone?
Love it. Now I'm guessing the first thing you did probably was like, okay, has anybody built an app? Is there any competitors? I'm sure you looked.
Yeah, exactly. So I looked and there were like only 2 at the time.
Okay.
One was actually in our backyard here in Washington, D.C., and the other one was in Canada. So I looked at both of those apps and I was like, they're not very user friendly. I could tell they're built by people who probably don't smoke. So, and only two companies in this huge industry. I was like, there's room for advancement. There's room for someone to do it better. So, learned from them, took some of their mistakes, and then applied it to what we built today.
Yeah, but you're not a coder. You don't know how to code. And I mean, talk to me. How did you get it built, and how did you find the cash to pay the software engineers to do it? Well, talk to us about the construction of it, considering you're not a family trust multimillionaire, so you didn't have like $10 million sitting over here, and then you're also not a software engineer. So how did you put this together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I spent 3 years as a computer programmer, but I told my dad, I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to sit in a room and program all day. So I knew enough to be dangerous, but
okay.
It took me about 2 years to find my business partners. So I was, hunting for two people. One person had to be a developer, basically build the back end, the skeleton, if you will, the application.
Yep.
And then one person had to be the designer, the UX designer that puts the color and the text and everything in place.
Okay.
And so at that time, I was living in Baltimore, and there was a local watering hole right down the street that I used to always go to, and met my business partner, Julius Moore, there through a mutual friend. So I met him, and then he introduced me to Lucas Rowe because they used to work together. And so I basically pitched the idea to both of them, and they were like, yeah, I like it. And both of them were cannabis users, which was important to me, because I feel like, in order to build anything, you have to have a tie back to it in some way. So by both of them being users of cannabis, and Lucas especially has a medical condition where, similar to me, where he doesn't want to use pills, he wants to use plant-based medicine. So he really saw the need for cannabis and how it was helping him. And so that's how we got the team together. So that took about 2 years. And then, all this time while I was working at Constellation Energy, I was making great money. I mean, I was making $250, $300K a year. And so I stockpiled a lot of my cash. I've always been a saver. So once I got what I thought was going to be enough money, which damn sure wasn't enough money.
Never is. It never is.
Exactly. I said, all right, once I get 100 grand liquid, I'm leaving corporate America. And that's what I did. So I took that 100 grand, left corporate America, focused full time on building Tetragram with Julius and Lucas. So we built the beta version that's out now, I'd say 95% in-house.
Okay. And were they doing it like nights and weekends, and they kept their other jobs at first, or how'd they, or did they? Okay.
Yeah. They kept their full-time jobs. So there was a certain aspect of the beta version that we have that, they just weren't skilled enough to do. And so I reached out to MindGrub, which is a IT app development firm here in the Mid-Atlantic, probably the biggest in the Mid-Atlantic, and made inroads with the CEO there and shared my vision for what we were building. And he was like, I really like this. I really like this. I see a lot of potential with what you're building. And so he came in and said, we'll build out the remaining pieces. And I paid cash for that in order for them to build that out. So we got that beta version out the door pretty lean.
Okay. So your co-founder, are they co-founders or business? How you guys got it set up on the structure?
Co-founders. Yeah.
Okay. Did you split 30? What was the ownership structure? Can you share, or do you want to share that or no?
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't mind. I own the lion's share just because, it was majority of my capital that we were using.
Okay.
Plus it was my initial idea. So, I own close to 80% of the company.
Okay. So you're in control. So, and then you get this app development company to finish it off. You pay cash for that. Now, how were you living? Well, I guess you were just, your wife's salary was paying the bills. How are you surviving at that time? I'm just curious financially. And two-part question. And how was your wife feeling emotionally when you were like, yeah, I know I made $250 last year, but I'm going to quit my job and use our savings to start this thing. Can you talk about both of those?
Yeah, so one of the things I did when I left corporate America was I got a job at a dispensary.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, there was a dispensary right up the street from my house. Literally, I could have rode my bike there. And so I got that job for a number of reasons. One, I mean, it was an hourly job. It was only like $15 an hour, but any money can help when you're not making anything and you're
Mm-hmm.
pouring money out. So I got a job there just to bring some type of income in. But more importantly, I got a job there just so I can understand the pain points in the industry from a consumer's perspective and from a dispensary's perspective.
Yeah, great idea. Great idea. Although your wife's like, okay, you went from 250 to 35 grand a year. Okay, good job.
Oh yeah, it was tough too, man. Talk about humbling times. Sometimes I'd see people that I knew, friends, and they'd be like, "Whoa, talk about a fall from grace, huh?"
Yeah, they're like, bro, they're like, hey man, did you hear Otha's like working at a dispensary as like a bud tender? You know, they're talking about you at the bar, right? They're like, what the hell?
Exactly. You know, I know those conversations were happening, but
Not to mention your parents. Your parents are like, now, let me get this straight. So you finally recover from quitting school and getting your girlfriend pregnant early on. You recover from that. You finish school. You get a great job. You're making great money. And now you just quit all that to go be a bud tender. Oh, I bet they're like, what the fuck? Like, they're like, oh, what are you doing? Right. They had to.
oh yeah, 100%. But you know, I like my friend said, I have an aggressive personality, and people know that when I put my mind to something, you know, I'm a win. Like
Okay,
you know, I
cool.
always joke and say like my plan B is to make my plan A work, you know.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
but
pretty. That's pretty good. So you're working at the bud tender. Your wife's working.
yeah, so
She's
she
making a
was the
little
one that
bit
was,
of. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
my wife working, she, you know, she makes really good money, so she was able to support us, you know, while I was building this thing out. So, you know, that's something I was very fortunate in because a lot of people don't have that support system. So it worked out really well for me.
Bro, my third year. So when we started, I was same thing. I was making around 250 as a COO and CEO for a couple of $50 million companies, retail wholesale. And I quit to start Riderflex, our recruiting firm. And the first year I paid myself nothing. The second year, I think I paid myself 30 grand. And the third year, I think maybe it was close to 50 grand. And I remember, I'll never forget my wife. She's like, one day she's like, you know, she goes, I know you're really enjoying this and this is your passion, but if you don't start making more money, this ain't gonna work.
I'm right there with you. Like she definitely gave me a timeline. Like, all right, you know, I'll give you
Yeah.
what, you know, the average company takes what, like 3 to 5 years before they start getting cash flow positive and can actually pay themselves. She was like, so I'll give you 4 right in the middle, and you know, either
Okay.
make it happen or you got to go back to corporate America.
That's fair. That's fair considering she was supporting you, right? Like because the reality is, and I tell my wife this, like if it wasn't for our wives, it sounds like we were both in the same situation. If it wasn't for our wives and their jobs at the time, we may not have been able to do it, right?
Oh
Probably
yeah,
couldn't have
yeah,
done it. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Because you know that 100 grand that I had saved. I mean, we blew through that so quickly, and I was just like, "Damn, I thought this was going to last us." But
Yeah.
that's just the life of entrepreneurship, you know.
No doubt. So right now is probably a good time. Why don't you, as the company stands today, give us the Tetragram elevator pitch for everybody that is just now hearing about it. Give us the pitch. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so Tetragram is a mobile app that empowers cannabis and CBD consumers to really take control of their personal journey with cannabis through our mobile app. So they have the ability to not only document what products they're using and then rate how effective those products are specifically for treating a medical condition, but they also share that information anonymously, not only with other cannabis consumers, but also with their dispensaries or doctors. So, you know, at the end of the day, the data helps consumers be more knowledgeable about what products might potentially work best for them so that they can shop more effectively. And then all the data that we collect on the back end anonymously, we provide back to dispensaries, brands, and doctors so that they can have a better understanding of products that are in the market and their potential effects.
So what's the business model? Do the consumers pay for the app, or are you selling the data, or both? How do you make your money?
Yeah, so consumers will never pay for the app. It's completely free. Our business model is charging dispensaries, brands, and doctors for access to the de-identified data that we collect.
Gotcha.
In addition to that, we also are involved in research. So, our platform is utilized as the data collection partner with universities and independent researchers. And that's not only with cannabis, but also for mushrooms as well, which is something that we have a lot of interest in.
Okay. All right. Very good. How big is the company today? I don't do you want to give us a general size of revenue or employees? I don't know how much you want to share. I know it's a private company, but just how big are you?
Yeah, so we're still small but mighty. So it's still Julius and Lucas and myself. So it's still the three amigos.
Okay.
But we have our tech partners, which are Mind Grub, of course, and One Rivet. So, we have an army behind us when it comes to our tech development.
All right.
In terms of revenue, we're actually about to be knocking on the door generating revenue. So, we've done a little bit of revenue generation with our beta version through our research opportunities.
Okay.
But we haven't really fully broke out in terms of our revenue until we release our flagship version of Tetragram, which I'm happy to announce today will be out in the next couple months. So it's really exciting times.
I see. So really, okay. So you're still early on, technically pre-revenue, technically still in beta, but the full version coming really soon. That's great.
Yeah, super excited about it.
Damn, that's a long time. So you've been doing it for 2-3 years. It's a long time, but no salary, bro. That's a long time. Did you raise some cash? How?
Yeah. So it's been almost 3 years with no salary, man. So just dumping money out. So, we were fortunate enough to raise $500,000.
Oh, you did? Oh, bingo. There you go. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but that $500,000 came indirectly. So it wasn't actually cash in hand. It came through our tech services to build out Tetragram 2.0. So
let me ask you, did they? Okay. So
still no money going in my pocket.
Gotcha. So you made a deal with the IT company, so to speak, to do services
exactly
that were valued at $500,000.
Exactly.
Okay. What did they get equity for that, or are they on a loan, or how'd you spend that?
Yeah, so we exchanged equity in exchange for the services.
Great job.
So, yeah.
Great job.
Yeah, best way to do it. And that was at a $4 million evaluation. So
what? Who said you were worth $4 million? You and your co-founders?
No, yeah. We had, if it was me, I'd say it'd be 12 million. But no, it was we had an outside party, a third party actually do our evaluation for us, and that was Schulman Rogers. So major shout out to them as well.
Who paid for that? That service?
Coming out of my pocket.
Hey, great move. So this is a good. Let's just take a breath right here, because for the listeners, everybody says, "Oh, hang on to your equity as much as you can." Well, yeah, that's great in theory, but there are times when you're early on like this, where if you haven't raised any cash yet, or you don't have friends and family that are going to write a check for 500,000, it's a great move to talk to one of your providers, a supplier or a service provider that you're using to try to get your product launched. If they believe in you, a lot of times they will invest, so to speak. Maybe it's cash, maybe it's just services. Sometimes they'll do a loan, sometimes they'll do it for equity, but that's a great move on your part. And are you still in control of the company, even though you gave them a piece of equity?
Oh yeah, I mean, with the equity we gave up, it's less than 10%, and again, that just goes to show the value of our company, the valuation. But to your point, that's one of the things I learned early on through some of my mentors is directly what you said. Like, if you take cash, it comes at a heftier price tag, and especially for us being in the tech side of things, having strategic partners that they could give you cash, but more importantly, give you the tech services you need to really scale and be lean. That's crucial, super crucial. And I will admit, I did a pitch competition with Connectpreneur, which is based here in Maryland, DC area, and Tetragram was only out about 6 months at that time, and I raised $1 million within 24 hours through that. But I want to, I want to share this because I learned a lot through that process. So, raised $1 million, had the term sheet signed, and the investor had no connections to cannabis whatsoever, had no connections to technology. It is what the industry calls dumb money when it comes to raising capital.
Mm.
And so that investor was taking 2 to 3 months after we had the term sheet signed to deliver the funds. And so I started looking, I was like, we've only been out 6 months. I'm giving up close to 20% equity in my company right off the bat.
Mm.
I'm going to need to raise capital again, which is just going to further dilute me.
Absolutely.
And so I declined it. I actually canceled it. It was a tough decision, but it's probably one of the best decisions I've made as an entrepreneur because, finding strategic partners that not only bring capital, but bring resources or relationships is so much more powerful than it's someone with capital.
Great move, Otha. Great move. And you're right. So many of these investors, and I'm going to piss off some of my investor friends because I've had a shit ton of them on the podcast, but so many of them strategically give you just enough cash, knowing that they're going to have to write another $1 million check in 12 months and dilute you further, right? Like it's a strategy. Yep. Like, and you got to be really careful with that. You have to really understand, like, okay, if I'm giving this percentage up, I run out, and then they're going to take another 20%. So yeah, you got to be super careful. Yeah, great move on your part.
Yeah, and that's why we're able to be very lean, where I'm able to use my wife, of course, and not shelling out tons of money for IT, because anyone who knows IT know it is not cheap. I mean, V2 alone is 300,000-400,000. So
Yep. Great move. Couple of more questions here. I know we're almost out of time. I'm sure I'm bumping you up against something you got scheduled. Is this a race against competition? Because, other people could build an app, right? You can't really like super secret patent it, but
yeah.
Do you just see this as a branding race to market to capture as many users before other people do this? How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, with those two companies that were out prior to us going live, no one had really heard of them. To the credit, one of those companies was specifically focused on just the research side, but definitely it is a race to get market share, for sure, which is why we spent an enormous amount of time building out our brand, building out our mission behind why we built Tetragram. Like you see behind me, built for patients by patients, and that
I like that.
really resonates with people. So
I like it.
now that version, our beta version, is scaled so dramatically, the cat's out of the bag. So now everyone's trying to build what we're doing. So it's an exciting time because competition creates innovation, but at the same time, we need to be at the finish line first.
Okay. I really think there's a need for what you're doing, and I can give you testimony on why I think it is. So I'm 50. I'll be 56 this summer, unfortunately. But
look good, my man.
When I was growing up, it's kind of like you talked about earlier. There were two kinds of weed when I was in high school and college. I call it two kinds of weed. You had friends that had good weed with no stems and seeds in it, and then you had the shitty weed with stems and seeds. Like those are the only two kinds of weed I knew. Like there were no strains and names and indicas. Yep. There was none of that. None of that.
I got Kind Bud. I remember that. It was always Kind Bud.
Yeah. I'm like, it is so true, bro. You said first time you walked into a dispensary, same thing here in Colorado. First time I went to a dispensary, they start talking about all these different things and all this stuff. I'm like, wow, this is nothing like I remember growing up. Like, I just remember you either had weed or you didn't have weed. That was it.
Yep.
But my point is, now that we can go to dispensaries, my wife and I, and we're what I call bedtime users, helps us go to sleep. So we're, usually at night, like we're getting ready to crash or whatever, we'll do a little just to sleep, or maybe at a casual party or something. But there's so many strains and flavors and this and this and this that half the time I can't even remember what I bought last time, or, I'll be like, oh, that one thing we bought, like, what was that? And then I'll go to the dispensary. I can't fucking remember. I'm like, I don't even remember what I bought last time. and then some kid behind the counter suggests something else. And so I never track it. And so, yeah, if I had an app that really helped me track it better, I think I would be a better purchaser and a smarter buyer. So I love the idea.
Yeah, and that's the whole goal. That's why we live by the word empowerment, because, by keeping track, you as a consumer, you'll know what products are going to work best for you. But, ultimately, when you go into a dispensary and specifically for medical conditions, and you're like, hey, Steve, I got anxiety. What do you recommend?
Yeah.
That bud tender doesn't know the first clue about what to recommend to you.
That's right.
And by utilizing our data, we can change that concept so that they're more consultative. We're saying, hey, Steve, you suffer from anxiety. 4,000 people are rated this product working well. Let's start here. And that's huge in terms of changing the, that experience when you're in the store.
Love it. Love everything you're doing. Tetragramapp.com, tetragramapp.com. You can also connect with Otha on LinkedIn as well. Otha Smith III on LinkedIn, if you want to look him up there. Any other websites or URLs? I know you guys are on Instagram, Facebook. Anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, definitely follow us on Instagram at the Tetragram app. You have to spell it completely out or else you won't find us because we've been shadow banned. That's another issue in this industry, but
yeah, you have to come back. That's another show. We'll do another show on that topic.
Oh yeah, I mean, we need a couple shows for that one, but yeah, and just be on the lookout for version 2. Will be out in the next couple of months, so that's going to be our flagship version. So we're excited about it.
Congratulations, Otha. Thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Had a great time.